Morning, David Atkins, target individual. Today I'm going to be talking about neuropsychological and electronic no torture, the spectrum of torture techniques used by these countries and its allies. But first I'm going to start off with a Bible verse that I think is pertinent to us, to eyes, and that is Matthew 12:25. And it says, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand." And us targeted individuals are at a point right now where we're divided against each other. We're calling, some of us are calling real TIs, perps, and all that. I mean, this program has us divided really big time, and that shouldn't be happening. I've thought of ways to bring us together. I am just mind boggled by this because we do need to be coming together, because the more strength and numbers we have, the better we are. But what they do, they flood these groups and stuff with real perps. And so it gets people so suspicious, they start thinking real TIs are perps. I mean, I'm seeing this more and more in these groups I'm involved in. However, like Brian too said, a lot of groups are involved, a lot of controlled oppositions are in groups. So it's dangerous really to be involved in groups, but then again, you want to try to coordinate stuff to be involved in groups. Anyway, I'm going to start this information, just food for thought. We need to come together somehow. Torture is a horrific topic, and this is by Robert Duncan. It was an article he wrote in 2021. Torture is a horrific topic. Most minds will turn away from it because it can't be comprehended. That humans can be motivated, or computer programs can be run to do this to other sentient beings. Just when we would believe we were becoming more civilized as a culture, the technology for torture has advanced more than 100-fold in recent decades. This summary will get into the minds of the dishonorable monsters of the psychology torture. Those like Dick Cheney, who helped authorize it under certain administrations and regimes in the U.S. government, which have been proven to be criminal under U.S. laws, treaties, and the International Criminal Court. There are many people involved in conspiracy and cover-up, including General Hayden. This full report discloses a spectrum of techniques of torture used by U.S. and allies. Well, they will officially deny the claims of no-touch torture report, but in time it will stand firm. These technologies used are still unclassified, as state secrets will not be discussed in this summary. Torture methods have been leaked through thousands of American citizens who have survived the no-touch torture programs. The research and testimony has been accumulated since 2002, merely used as examples, but the names of the victims withheld. Why torture? The CIA claims it works. The assumption that it works gained actionable intelligence. Torture is often used for revenge, punishment, interrogation, behavior modification. In other terms, torture is used to remove the continuity of thought, to confuse the target, to reveal information, erase brain patterns such as values of beliefs, to break down the human spirit, to make them submit and obey their handlers. The downside of torture is that countries that do it lose moral soft power in world politics. Without due process, over 25,000 of those reported in the Senate torture report were declared innocent. Blowback is always a repercussion of torture. And I'm going to get into the techniques and stuff he talks about and weapons in just a minute. I'm leading up to it. Torture is shown to be unreliable except for getting false confessions, bad information. Okay. The purpose of the report is to draw parallels between physical torture techniques and non-torture methods used in secret by governments who possess the technology that's still going today. This is a brief summary of offensive psychological information warfare methods using traditional methods, modern cybernetic techniques, while exploring hyper-game theory to walk the target to the desired path, leak intelligence, commit assassinations, or change beliefs. Enumerated torture methods for interrogation and behavior modification, a comparison between physical and no-touch torture. Induction of depressive manic states. The idea is to shake up the emotional state of the target because different information can be accessed to each state, making the target feel despair and helplessness as the objective. The cycle of hope building and then breaking is done in many ways. The techniques between physical methods and the no-touch technological methods are similar. Speech is very important during this process of emotional manipulation. Such examples are, "We have imprisoned you without due process or hope of it. You're indefinitely detained." Hope building example includes, "Sorry, we've mistaken you for somebody else." You'll be compensated for false imprisonment and torture. The main difference between cybernetic technology and physical is that the emotional state clusters can be entrained into the target mind, which speeds up the process. The communication is done differently, but perceived as human speech. In the no-touch torture methods, it is helpful if the target's labeled with mental illness that is being created for discrediting purposes so as not to draw human rights groups' attention. Memory erasure. The military and the CIA have been researching memory erasing drugs for half a century. The focus of this summary report is on interrogation. Memory erasure is an important technique during interrogation. It's used in combination with sleep deprivation, and I know this part right here ain't got nothing to do with targeting, but still it does. They can still use this on targets, but the rest of it does. There are many drugs that have been developed for physical memory erasure. One such interrogation memory method requires acquiring information from the target while on these drugs and recording the subject. After a sleeping cycle, the interrogator claims that the target has confessed. Of course, the target remembers nothing of their conversation. The interrogator will play back samples of the subject's conversation back to them, making the subject believe that the interrogator knows more than they do. Similar techniques are used in the wireless no-touch torture interrogation programs. The cybernetic methods of memory erasure have additional purposes. The memory erasure can be used on the cybernetic target to make the target believe people have broken in and moved their belongings. While physical black bag jobs do occur, it is a way to make the target more paranoid. Pain and electricity and shock. Pain and fear of death are common tactics during interrogation. Shocking by electricity is a traditional method of torture and exposing CIA's prisons. Secret prisons. Shocking the testicles and nipples are most common due to their sensitivity. Interesting, thousands of interviews and no-touch torture involve stings and shocks to various parts of their body over long durations. So you see, these torture techniques that they really used on interrogating people for the CIA and stuff. Now they're doing it on Americans and Europeans and in every country's involved. There are many techniques to induce extreme fear in the target. In physical renditions, dogs, fire drills, guns, insects, mutilation, blow touches, waterboarding, suffocation, mock burials, mock execution are just a few they have used. Remember that many targets of torture die from physical effects. It's torture to death. Let's compare the no-touch torture methods used to inflict the same terror and mental anguish. In several of these techniques, the target needs to hear the handler's voice. The report does not describe the technologies used to broadcast voices to the target at a distance. While the subjects can be broadcast mental images to their mind using hypnosis and other suggestions as well as visual entrainments. The more evasive controls of the brain manipulation technologies can be used to entrain the brain's automatic nervous system, such as not breathing, causing the target not to be able to sleep in fear of suffocation, equivalent to waterboarding. The neurolinguistic programming can add fears such as heart attack, stroke, and cancer threats. Even motor cortex mapping can cause twitches in any part of the body. One example used a swift neck movement with a voice transmission. We're trying to break your neck. Directed energy effects such as active denial system can make the target feel that they're on fire indefinitely without the target dying from burns. I know that. Maximum pain and torture weapons have been evolving. Every drug effect can be artificially induced into the target mind, including those of poisons. Imprisonment and isolation. Isolation is commonly used as a punishment in prisons. Many whistleblowers like Bradley Manning suffer this condition. In soft interrogation, it's used to get the target to talk to their interrogator since humans have the need for companionship. In no-touch torture, the target is driven from their friends and family using different techniques in order to isolate them so the electronic mind control has more effect on their psyche. Like in Guantanamo, the target becomes isolated, losing their job and medical care. Part of the method involves slander in their community. They end up on the most part in poverty and paranoid about doctors and other people from false correlations that are purposely induced in their lives. Isolation is also a form of sensory deprivation, which will be discussed later. Days and weeks lose their meaning. And sexually disturbing tailored pornography. The summary of Senate torture report disclosed the disgusting revelations that in secret torture prisons, the targets were forced to perform homosexual acts on each other against their will and religion in order not to be beaten or killed. This is a common breakdown tactic of belief systems and human will. In no-touch torture, the techniques are more psychologically specialized for each target. Most common examples include homosexual targets that are forced with voices that are derogatory to their lifestyle and similar mental images. Almost all targets are forced to view child pornography in their minds, and vice versa is true that heterosexual targets are forced to view homosexual acts like in secret U.S. torture prisons. I don't know nothing about that. I've never experienced none of that. But if you have, I don't look down on you. And, it is what it is. It's part of just no different from getting burned. I mean, it's worse, but, I'm just saying an act is an act. Nobody's different in this program. We're all victims of being tortured. Mutilation, also mentioned in declassified report on torture, was mutilation of the human. Cutting the naked target's penis and scrotum, pulling nails or teeth is common. In no-touch torture, mutilation is done by trickery. Let us look at a couple examples. There have been several targets who believe that microwave hearing effect and other voice induction methods were done by microchips implanted in their teeth or ears. They had all their teeth pulled because they believed it was a technology called bone conductors. Others have poked out their eardrums in the belief that had micro implants in their ears. There are many more examples of trickery used to make the targets mutilate themselves. Yeah, and I agree with that. And there are instances they wouldn't put on the mainstream media. I read about them. I read some reports on them. I wish I could find them. I read about them a long time ago. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying people will have implants in their teeth or, in their ears. I believe they do. I know people that do. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they trick some people that don't have implants into doing that. And it's called nano tricks, is what Robert Duncan talks about. And physical torture, personal and spiritual defamation. In physical torture, the CIA and other groups use propaganda and defamation of character for they oppose. For detainees try to disenfranchise their target from their religion. They would deprecate on their Bible or Quran, for example. They may say, "Why is your God not saving you?" In no-touch torture and behavior modification, they might try to make an atheist believe in God. It's just a mechanism to alter belief systems for control and experimentations. Perhaps the target may wish to confess their secrets to a voice of God weapon. And I've experienced that. The one, "Why is your God not saving you?" I used to experience it all the time. And, I fell away from God due to that for a while because I was asking the same questions. But, I realize, Peter had to suffer. All Jesus' disciples basically ended up suffering. So, I guess that's that's the cost of discipleship. Okay, information warfare covers the government and electronic communication as well. The government training exercise uses language like befriend, infiltrate, mask, mimic, ruse, set up, disrupt, create cognitive stress, use deception, ruin business relationships, and post negative information on appropriate forums in a malicious effort to target bloggers, activists, and journalists, social event organizers, and anyone else deemed to be emerging leader or voice in a public sphere. 9. Psychological intimidation. This is a topic for a target at the beginning of trials and programs. Physical break-ins are common even if the target has an alarm system. The NSA has used stalking of foreign officials in the past for economic gain. The FBI does black bag jobs to invade a home without a warrant. The point is to let the target know they are being watched and increase their paranoia. The NSA can easily hack all computer systems to cause harm to the victim's intellectual property and relationships from that endpoint. In the no-touch torture, false correlations between pain and a neighbor coming home can be induced. 10. Rape. I have a lot of friends that experience this remotely, no-touch torture. And if you are not a target, not familiar with this is real. Rape is a common practice in torture. It causes much psychological trauma. In the United States, methods of rape in their military and CIA prisons often relabeled. It's commonly caused by prods, but rectal dehydration is a more common misnomer. Often they call it force feeding through the rectum, but it's meaning to induce psychological scarring and trauma. Several have died from the technique due to rectal bleeding. In no-touch torture, the psychological trauma of simulated rape takes on different forms. Using technique often called EEG heterodyning, the targets will receive molestation effects of their genitals. In men, this can be the anus and genitals. Similarly, women can be wirelessly raped by the analogous function of perception. I'm glad I ain't got that, and I know a couple people that are targeted that get that, and it's horrible. Just think of being, remotely. It's horrible. Then we need to wake in, y'all. If y'all don't believe this stuff, y'all need to wake up and do some research. All right, 11. Dietary manipulation, force weakness, and sickness. The idea behind dietary manipulation is to weaken the target. This is done in physically setting, but in no-touch torture, the hunger trigger needs to be suppressed. Sometimes a false correlation between eating food and sickness is induced to make the target believe they're being poisoned. However, poisoning is common in the physical renditions too. Repetition. Verbal breakdown is the most important during interrogations and torture. Obviously, speaking the language of the target is necessary. This is why there are interrogators in all language. Repetition is an important neuralistic programming interrogation tactic to influence the target mind. During the breakdown process, threats to kill and torture to the target's family are common. Repetition, questioning, and breakdown phases are automated in both the physical and no-touch torture versions of torture. An interesting technology that is used for no-touch torture is called chatterbots. Chatterbots, an artificial intelligence program, automate much of the repetition so that the interrogators don't drive themselves crazy during the neuralistic torture and programming phases. Let's not forget the Chinese water torture, a single drop of water on the forehead from the detainee for months. Repetition is a form of torture. Sensitization of pain impulses. While the reverse can be obtained, optimizing perceived pain and misery is the objective in torture. Each trauma adds to the overall misery throughout life. Optimization of pain has been studied by the military and intelligence agencies. In the past, the CIA has used drugs like LSD to enhance fear and terror in the subject. Other methods such as hypnosis can increase perceived pain, and the power of suggestion such as telling the subject his pinky finger is going to be cut off before it's done. In no-touch torture, the same psychological manipulations are exerted. Subliminal and overt suggestions are often told to the subject before the direct energy or e.g. heterodyning pain inductions in order to maximize their effectiveness. I already know about all that. Gosh. So what he's saying is they'll let you know you're going to be burned before you start getting burned with direct energy weapons. Again, this technique, sensory overload or deprivation. Again, this technique of overloading or depriving the human of sensory stimulus is ubiquitous in torture around the world, not just in the U.S. secret prisons. Torture subjects in the United States have reported the use of repetitive bad music and noise campaigns. An unusual torture technique used in the secret prisons was of a plastic suit filled with ice while they beat the target. Ultra bright lights for days on end in the prison. Hot, cold temperature changes in the environment are frequent. In no-touch torture, the target's brain is forced to release dopamine, which causes pupil dilation. This acts as a sensory overload. For example, the non-lethal microwave weapons research done by a professor in the University of Nevada has shown this capability. Body metabolism can be altered with these weapons, causing cold and hot flashes. Targets in no-touch torture often hear endless tinnitus, and I get this fluttering. It's usually in my left ear, that sound, but it's pounding in my ear. And also, the hot flashes, I don't get cold flashes, I get hot flashes. Okay, sexual humiliation and lack of privacy. Often used in common prisons, lack of privacy is both a necessity for security and form of sexual humiliation. Also in prison, many people are raped. No-touch torture offers the same sexual humiliation, lack of privacy by using through-the-wall radar, cameras, EEG visual cloning to let the target know they're being watched. Degrading comments are often used on the no-touch torture subjects while they are naked or in the bathroom. 16. Maximum sensory pain techniques. Basic torture involves brutalization, physical strikes, kicks, pepper spray, tear gas. Anything that involves maximum pain is objective. Amazingly, these same tortures can be done wirelessly into the human mind. All forms of sickness have been reported without any real illness behind the suffering. All suffering can be entrained into the minds of the no-touch torture victims. So they can make you feel pain from remotely, anytime they want, any part of your body. Okay, sleep deprivation. This is the #1 torture method along with the popularity in the press of waterboarding. This is done in every country that uses torture. The United States is #1 in torture since they are currently the world's only superpower. A repetitive sleep deprivation cycle is generally done 180 hours / 7.5 days at a time in the physical renditions. Or in no-touch torture, 5 days awake, 2 days of sleep. So what they do is you go to no-touch torture, which is basically non-lethal, what they call non-lethal weapons, bull crap. Okay, sleep deprivation, so they will keep you awake 5 days at a time and let you get 2 days of sleep. Sleep deprivation accomplishes the objective of memory loss during interrogation and induces hallucinations, which help with interrogation progress. And behavior modification and program is necessary too. Stress positions. Keeping detainees handcuffed above their head and walls so they must stand for days is a common point in torture. These top poses are called stress positions. They can be mimicked in no-touch torture. An example of one such trick requires the target to believe that they can deflect radar energy using pots or pans and that it's directional. The target is being given an ample amount of pain until their hands and arms are spread apart holding the pans trying to block the signal. They must maintain that position in order to get any relief from the torture signals. However, the stress position itself is physical torture. Often accompanying this technique are voices saying to the target, "You are doing it to yourself." We will finish off this summary of U.S. and its allies' torture, interrogation, and behavior modification with the ideas of why they are done to the general public and falsely accused detainees. Anyone can be put in these programs. Justice and rule of law does not exist at the highest levels of government. Treaties are worthless because the number one agreement in the rules of war, a ban against torture, is not obeyed. This creates a more brutal and barbaric society led by example. No-touch torture uses the same interrogation tactics as physical interrogations, but with some new twists. Techniques such as Jeff and Moot, aka good cop, bad cop, are used. The bad cop tortures the target and the good cop tries to gain their trust. In mind control, trust games are commonly employed to manipulate the belief of the target. Creating hatred of groups through false correlations and deception is a common CIA method of trickery. In the CIA programs, the targets put through these phases as written in this documentation. Disorient and confuse the target. Use them for our purposes and then dispose of them in any way possible. We can only surprise by our sample set of 1,000 people what dispose means. Prison, suicide, perhaps a mental hospital. Coercion and torturing people to suicide is very common. Both tactics and physical or no-touch torture involves plausible deniability. The no-touch torture interrogation. The no-touch interrogations are better than physical rendition techniques for exposing support networks. Traditional NSA tracking of email and phone calls are useful, but if the targets are taken into a secret prison, they can't contact their networks. And no-touch torture, the target will contact everyone who might help them. Then those relationships can be destroyed to isolate the targets. All these techniques rely on the target having a fear of death and pain. Deception is very important during interrogation, physical interrogation. This creates confusion necessary to pull off certain trickery. In terrorist interrogations, for example, the CIA uses fake newspaper to make the target believe whatever they were suspected of plotting had already happened, obviously looking for confession. Sometimes the government in charge of the torture is looking for political gain through a false confession. Nonetheless, false flag operations are commonly used in both forms of torture and interrogation. The trick's to make the target believe another foreign country is doing it to them. In no-touch torture, the trick's to make them believe someone related to them is behind their suffering. Voice transformation and morphing is an interesting technology also used in both physical and wireless interrogations. It is the form of deception used against a target to trick them believing that they are speaking to real people that they know. It's been used in war to trick generals. Obviously, spoofing email and other identities on internet forums can be used in a manner too. Finally, the topic of human experimentation, improving weapons, torture, interrogation, social disruption methods will be breached. Most of the techniques mentioned above work most effectively if the target has no survival, evasion, resistance, or escape training or psychological understanding of the methods to influence the human mind. Unfortunately, every sample point in the world society needs to be studied to improve the weapon system. This is why many random people are put into torture and mind control experiments. There are some devious uses of a secret army of remote controlled assassins in every country in the world. The samples must include different education, language, culture, and economic factors. Obviously, silent dissidents, oppositions of political parties, whistleblowers are included in a list of applications. The most disturbing of the trends in torture is testing and improving it. No-touch torture is much more complex than physical torture. Testing design flaws and weaknesses of the signal intelligence is one reason why it's necessary to test on innocent targets. Often the subject will be taunted by the statement, "Try to stop us." This statement forces the torture subject to try to figure out shielding and jamming techniques to stop the wireless torture and help the weapons designers to improve on the system. However, the psychological perceived physical pain is only half the story with no-touch torture. It also involves a set of scripts, mind games, if you will, to walk the target in murder and suicide. This is called the hyper game theory. It is used in war games to determine how to control your enemies and targets. Game theory can be used on governments and individuals for determining propaganda to alter cultures. The experiments on the public provide a means to test the efficiency of these scripts and determine under what circumstances to use them. One last comment on why we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned. During these torture programs run by the U.S. and its allies, accurate true data points need to be used to judge the efficiency of the interrogation methods. This is why there's a dispute between CIA and Senate Intelligence Committee reports about usefulness of torture. Subterfuge by the CIA hacking into the Senate Oversight Committee computers is a big deal. A rogue agency has been formed. Data fusion centers, land security fusion centers, NSA and FBI collect data on Americans. This data is in turn used during torture and Americans in no-touch torture. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. God bless y'all. In the comments, in my community, I put my PayPal and my GoFundMe. My rent's due on the 21st. I am disabled since September of last year. I did 45 days in the hospital. My left leg's basically crippled. So if you could help out, it's listed in, if you go in the community, under my post, it's listed. If not, I understand. Just give me my prayers. Well, God bless y'all. Like I said, I'm always open to suggestions, and I'm probably going to I got some information about Tupac already gathered about his whole family being a target. Let me know if y'all would love to hear that. Thanks. God bless.